From the heart of the Space City to the heart of Gen Z, welcome to Next Gen Conversation. Not Dad's Talk Radio. Ethan talks to you about the issues and events that matter to our generation. This is the Next Gen Report with Ethan Buchanan.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Next Gen Report. Good afternoon, good to be with you. Boy, how about yesterday, huh? If you're hearing from me for the first time, you tuned in by chance, you didn't know I was going to be here at this hour at this station. My name is Ethan Buchanan. On Sunday, I predicted and kind of crossed my fingers and hoped that Donald Trump would not endorse at all in this race. Part of that was because I thought he was going to endorse John Cornyn if he did endorse. And the other part was, and I still hold to this, I frankly would have preferred for Ken Paxton to just win the primary on his own outright. That's neither here nor there now. It doesn't matter. But I was wrong. Donald Trump did indeed endorse, and he did indeed endorse Ken Paxton. We're going to talk about that in a minute here coming up in the next segment. Before we do that, I want to talk about teenagers and teen violence and what's being done about that. Before we do even that, I want to talk to you about my show sponsor, Deus Volt lapel pins. If you've heard me before and you want to hear me more on this station or others, you want to see more of the podcast, you want to see more video content from me, the way to do that is go to deusvoltlapelpins.com, DEUSVULT lapelpins.com, and check out my amazing sponsor. I mean, these lapel pins look great. If you wear a suit jacket, you should wear a lapel with it. It just ties the whole outfit together every single time. Deus Volt lapel pins has a ton of fantastic designs. They've got designs that commemorate American heritage, Christian heritage, even Texan heritage. Those are some of my favorites. They've got some new ones in stock, or restocked, I should say. The Anglo-Saxon cross, which looks just super cool. The Appeal to Heaven flag. If you're a big fan of American history, the 250th anniversary of the country, now's a great time to grab that pin. Go to deusvoltlapelpins.com. Check out their stuff. They've got, again, a ton of really neat designs. Fantastic lapel pins. They're $6 a pop. You can get a 10% discount if you use promo code NEXTPIN2026. Check them out. Support the show. All right, listen. This is AM radio. I'm sure most of my audience is older folks, and I'm sure most of the older folks have some of the same complaints about Gen Z that I do. I mean, these kids have no discipline. And listen, I'm Gen Z. I'm younger. I'm in my early 20s. I understand. All right? I've seen it. I'm part of this generation. I know what the problems are. These are my people. There's just no self-control, no common sense, nothing whatsoever. I mean, the slightest inconvenience, the slightest slight, you think you're just a little bit offended, or somebody was just trying to wrong you or being mean to you just a little bit, or just slightly offends your whatever, your dignity, your sense of honor, whatever. It's immediately swinging, punching, ridiculousness. I think, personally, the issue here is parenting. That's neither here nor there. I want to give you some examples of what I'm talking about. This is from Fox's Brooke Taylor. More teen violence. Police confirm 3 teens were stabbed at a Narragansett, I don't know what the heck that is, town beach in Rhode Island today, as hundreds packed the beach and were captured on video, physically fighting and causing mayhem. So here's the video. And you can see there's some folks that are trying to just relax and enjoy the beach, and then there's a big crowd of people that are at each other's throats. Just going bananas. Now, thankfully, at least so far as I'm aware, no one has actually been killed or seriously hurt. Brooke reports that there were 3 minor stab wounds, so that's good. But, you know, you just have to ask the question, and forgive me if I sound like I'm ancient when I say this, but where in the world are the parents of these children? I mean, I was raised that, like, violence of any sort is always a last resort. I've preached this on the show before. I think you should be prepared to do violence, but only when, like, your life is in danger. And time again, we see these days where there's just like a little argument, or maybe it's a big argument, but it's just an argument, and it escalates to violence for no particular reason. And this is becoming more and more common, and it's getting more and more severe, but it's not even arguments. Sometimes kids just get together and destroy things. This got really big in 2020 during the George Floyd riots, and it never really kind of calmed down after that. Here's a video that Libs of TikTok posted. This is in Norfolk, Virginia. And I don't even know what caused this, but this is just a horde of teenagers just setting stuff on fire. See it in the video. They're shooting fireworks. I guess they've thrown Molotov cocktails or something because the parking lot's on fire. And they're just hanging around doing property damage. You know, just like you used to when you were growing up. It's just kids having fun. There is another particular case, and this one is the one that caught my attention the most, and this is the video you've probably seen if you're active on X. You should be active on X, by the way. Go follow me on X, @_Ethan Buchanan, Buchanan. Check me out there. This is insane. This is at a Chipotle, and they're just beating the hell out of each other with the chairs. Throwing them across the room, smacking each other upside the head with them. This is insane. And then you can see it in the corner. There's a father with his 2 children just cowering in the corner trying to shelter them. That's frankly heartbreaking. I mean, I have no idea what in the world caused this, and frankly, I don't care. All of these people should do 5 years in prison, minimum. I don't care how old they are. All of them is at least 16, I can tell. Every single one of them. 5 years minimum. You can get out when you're 20. You're clearly not capable of being in society, and you clearly have no one raising you, which is an even bigger part of the problem. And that raises the question, well, how do we address this? What do we do? We can't really force parents to raise their children. Can we? Can we? I don't know. Janine Pirro, the assistant district attorney for DC, or maybe she is the district, she is the U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. She says she's going to start charging parents. She said this in a press conference. This is reporting from the New York Post. The city belongs to law-abiding residents, not roaming mobs looking to make a name for themselves or contribute to chaos. We're coming for you. We're coming for your parents, she declared, threatening charges and fines up to $500 for all curfew violators as well. Listen, I don't have anything against it. If that's what it takes to get parents to raise their children, do it. I'm all for it. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Once again, I want to ask you real quick, go follow my X page @_Ethan Buchanan, Buchanan. If you're not used to hearing me on Wednesday afternoons, this is a pleasant little surprise for you. That is the best way to stay in touch. And I would love to, by the way, know whether or not this is your first time hearing me. So give me a follow on X. Let me know when and where you found the show. Did you just happen to tune in this afternoon, or did you know I was going to be here? Did you come looking for me? Either way, super happy to be with you this afternoon here on AM 950 KPRC. Now, let's talk about the Senate endorsement. Again, I'll admit, I miscalled it. I thought that the ship had sailed. I thought that Trump was just going to stay out of this. And I had made peace with that, and I kind of liked that idea. I still kind of like that idea. I know Ken Paxton was going to beat John Cornyn either way. I mean, just the polling alone made it very clear that John Cornyn did not have a chance in hell at beating Ken Paxton. He just didn't. The data just didn't show it. So I kind of liked the idea of Ken Paxton just winning this outright on his own without the Trump endorsement. Maybe that's just my Texan sense of independence or something. I don't know. But I like that idea, and I was happy with it. But Donald Trump endorsed Ken Paxton. I'm happy with that too. So I want to take a minute to read a little bit of that endorsement to you. So here it is. The highly respected Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, an America First patriot and someone who has always been extremely loyal to me and our amazing MAGA movement. Now, I want you to just kind of bookmark that in your mind, because if you know anything about President Trump, you know he's big on loyalty. He has forever. There's clips of him going around from like the 90s in interviews, long before he got into politics, where he's saying like, yeah, I think loyalty is super important to me. It's like the most important thing to me in the world. If you even slightly don't stand with me, I count that as just a great disloyal action, and I'll hold it against you. La-di-da-di-da. So this is well known about President Trump. Now, keep that fact in your mind. Extremely loyal to me and our amazing MAGA movement, is running for the United States Senate to represent a place I love and won big 3 times with 6.4 million votes in 2024, the most votes in the history of the state by far. I know Ken well and have seen him tested in the highest and most difficult levels, and he is a winner. Ken is a strong supporter of terminating the filibuster and, very importantly, the Save America Act, something which polls at 87%, including the Democrats, and yet can't seem to get approved. Now, I'll remind you, right after the first round of the primaries, when Trump first suggested that he was going to endorse in this race, Ken Paxton actually came out and said, if the SAVE Act gets passed, and one of the ways it gets passed is Trump using his endorsement as leverage, endorses John Cornyn, I will respect that and drop out so long as the SAVE Act gets passed. A lot of people thought that what was going on. John Cornyn was just going to use his influence in the Senate to push the SAVE Act forward. In return, he would get the Trump endorsement. Now, obviously, that never happened, and so Ken Paxton got the endorsement. But if you're upset by this for some reason, you have no one to blame but John Cornyn and the Senate Republican leadership. That's it. That's the only people you have to blame. Now, let's skip ahead a little bit. Here's what he said about John Cornyn. This is important too. John Cornyn is a good man, and I worked well with him, but he was not supportive of me when times were tough. Remember what we said about loyalty. Loyalty is very, 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 very important to Donald Trump. And you'll recall, it's been said before, it'll be said again. Cornyn said Trump's time had passed. We needed to move on. La-di-da-di-da. That's one of the big reasons that so many people in the Republican Party were shocked that it was taking so long for Ken Paxton to get this endorsement. Because we all know, because we're fans of Trump and we watch what he does and we go back and look at what he said, we know he values loyalty. And because we're politically active and have been for a long time and have long political memories, we know that John Cornyn was not as loyal to Donald Trump as Ken Paxton was. I mean, this is common knowledge. Troy Niels went out and posted a clip. This is actually from yesterday on Fox. This is Ken Paxton with Will Cain. And this is a good example of one of the many ways that Ken Paxton has demonstrated some actual loyalty and friendship for President Trump, whereas John Cornyn has not. Take a listen to this.
And then, of course, when he announced, when supposedly everybody thought Ron DeSantis was going to get it, and Donald Trump was in legal
He's talking about the 2024 election primary, by the way.
trouble, I showed up with Troy Nels to be the first 2 elected officials to show up at his announcement. There was no other elected official there. So we have stuck with him. John Cornyn, at the very same time, was not at his trial, was criticizing Donald Trump, saying he might be guilty, and also suggesting that he should not be our nominee, and that he would go with somebody, that John Cornyn would go with somebody else.
Now, he referenced there the 2023 trial. That's that bogus, like 34 felony count indictment that was some ridiculous money thing that they had basically made up. And so this whole trial is going on, and a lot of people were saying this could like make or break Trump's campaign. And then when Trump announced that he was running, a lot of people said, okay, well, whether or not Trump wins determines whether or not he actually goes to jail for this indictment. Now, you may remember, if you watched that very closely, there were several different days of that trial where Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton was there in the New York courtroom for, so far as I can tell, no other reason than just to support his friend Donald Trump. I have to assume that that was a factor to some degree. I have to assume that mattered. Because again, Trump has made loyalty his entire brand. Not his entire brand, but it's a big part of his brand. J.D. Vance made this point again as well. Loyalty, loyalty, loyalty. And that's really what I think this came down to. Ken Paxton has been loyal to President Trump and John Cornyn has not. Here's J.D. Vance saying that.
Well, I'd say a couple things, Nick. First of all, I think the president's very gratified by the response that he's heard from the base and from a lot of voters, I think, who are passionate about Ken Paxton. We think Ken Paxton is going to be a great senator for the people of Texas, but most importantly, a great United States senator who can work on solving the problems that all of us confront as a country together. I've known John Cornyn for a long time, but unfortunately, when it really counted, Ken Paxton was there for the country, was there for the president, and that's why he ultimately earned the president's endorsement. He thinks he's going to be a better senator, thinks he's going to make a better candidate. And so I do think it sends a message, but really not just the endorsement, but one of the things the president has done very effectively, going back 10 years in his leadership of the Republican Party and the country as president of the United States, is he said, I want people who fight for the good. I want people who can't be bought by corporate lobbyists, who can't be bought by Wall Street, who can't be bought by special interests, who are going to go to Washington and fight for the people who actually elected them to those positions. And I think one of the things we've seen in the Republican Party, while I can't say that all of our representatives are perfect or all of our senators are perfect, we have seen a much better crop of talent come into Washington since Donald Trump has been the leader of the party and the leader of the movement. I do think we're going to continue to see that happening. But I think the message that people should take from this is fundamentally, you have got to serve the people who sent you. And if you don't do that, you're going to find yourself out of step with voters or out of step with the president of the United States, and that's not a good place to be politically.
And he's exactly right. Listen, you'll find a lot of people out there that'll say, I like John Cornyn more than Ken Paxton. I don't like the fact that Ken Paxton probably slept around, almost definitely slept around, cheated on his wife. And I don't like that either. I don't think that's good. But you will not find anyone who will say, I love John Cornyn's record in the Senate. It's just so good. If they exist, I haven't seen those people. And I don't think they exist. Unless maybe they're Democrats. And Democrats, I imagine, would like John Cornyn's record quite a bit because it's bland and it didn't do anything. And I said it on Sunday, I'll say it again. The Republican Party is going on offense. That's what Republican voters want. That's what they should demand. And I think that's what we're going to get. And I know that's what we're going to get with Ken Paxton. We'll be right back with more. Alrighty, so we're still talking about this Senate endorsement. Again, if you somehow missed it, yesterday, President Trump endorsed Ken Paxton to replace John Cornyn in the United States Senate. Now, I've played you a little bit of the reaction from kind of the pro-Paxton crowd, and I'm in that crowd. I've made no bones about this. I will always say this. I want you to make your own choices when it comes to elections. I'm going to do my best throughout my career. My career is very young now, so this might change. But to the best of my ability, I think I'm going to try never to endorse a political candidate. I will tell you who I'm voting for, who I support, and I'll tell you why. But I will never go say, you should vote for this person. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's a good spot for me to be in. That's just my opinion. But I was pro-Paxton, vocally so. I like Ken Paxton, and I don't have anything personally against John Cornyn. He's been on this show before, and I appreciate that. But I don't like his record in the Senate enough to support him. Now, other people did. John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader for the GOP, very much liked John Cornyn's record in the Senate. Here is what he had to say upon hearing the news that President Trump had endorsed John Cornyn. Take a listen to this.
Given that you've spent months trying to encourage, persuade the president to endorse John Cornyn in the Texas primary, and given that the NRSC has invested heavily to help Cornyn win that primary, how personally disappointed or frustrated are you with the president's decision to endorse Ken Paxton today?
Well, I think you all know my position on this issue. I've made it very clear for months now. And Senator Cornyn is a principled conservative. He is a very effective senator for the state.
Principled conservative. I just want to put that out there. You hear that a whole lot. The excuse that kind of rhino tier Republicans always have for being rhinos is, oh, I'm a principled conservative. I'm not like these MAGA Republicans. I'm a principled conservative. I have principles, and I stand on my principles, and I lose with honor, and I get absolutely destroyed in every instance that matters because I'm principled, and my principles, blah, 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 blah. I have come to the conclusion that principled conservative is shorthand for I'd rather lose than have to put in the effort and win and hurt people's feelings. And I am of the opinion that now is the time to slough off the principled conservative tier of the GOP and just start winning. And you can disagree with me on that all you want. I think that's fine. I think my own mom disagrees with me on that. We've had this discussion, my mother and I, because she's very much into the principles and the high road and all that good stuff. And I think that stuff is great when you have the luxury, but we're in an existential battle with a political entity in this country that wants to destroy the country from the inside out, from the top down. And as much as I would love to just stand on principle and lose honorably, I don't think that's a luxury that we have at this point in American history. And I think that's one of the reasons that John Cornyn, probably one of the biggest, is going to end up losing this primary. Because make no mistake, Donald Trump endorsing against him, that's it. It's over. It was over before, but now it's really over. It's like the Second World War. We had defeated Japan months before we dropped the 2 bombs. But then we dropped the 2 bombs and it was really over. This is, I think, the same. Anyway, continue, John Thune.
State of Texas, but none of us control what the president does. He made his decision about that. That doesn't change the way I feel, I am certainly supportive of, will continue to be supportive of Senator Cornyn and his reelection.
How much harder has he made it to keep the majority? How much harder has the president's decision here made it for you, the number one job, to keep the Republican majority, given your concerns about Ken Paxton's viability as a candidate?
We look at lots of races around the country, and the majority runs through a lot of different states. We have 24 seats up this time. The Democrats have only 9, so we've got a lot more ground to defend. We also have a couple of offensive opportunities. So, one state doesn't determine the outcome of this election, but obviously we care about every state, and we care about helping see our incumbents succeed. That being said, I feel very good about where we are. As I've said before, I think when it comes to winning elections, it starts with quality candidates. Then you got to have a record of accomplishment to run on. You've got to have resources to get that message out, tell that story to the American people. And then you've got to have a really substantial effort to get out the vote, a ground game. And I feel confident in all those elements in all the key states where we're going to have competitive elections this year. And I'm very confident we'll hang on and maybe even expand the majority of the United States Senate, which is counter, I know, to the sort of the narrative these days. But the truth of the matter is we've got the right candidates in the right places at the right time and with the right resources. We're going to win some races.
And I think he's exactly right there at the very end. But you have heard this quite a bit. This is going to make it harder for the Republican majority. This is going to hurt the Republicans. This has been the big argument. I'll give you an example of this. Joe Moody tweeted this out. Here's the dilemma for the R's. If Paxton wins, James Tallarico has a path to victory through gaining the support of Cornyn voters. If Cornyn wins, James Tallarico has a path to victory through the lack of energy amongst the R base. Make your choice either way. James is ready to win. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't. I don't think John Cornyn had this massive swell of super enthusiastic supporters who are now going to be devastated at the fact that John Cornyn won't be their nominee. I don't believe that. I don't think the polling ever showed that. I think the fact that John Cornyn had to spend like a drunken sailor just to barely keep his head above water and make it into a runoff exposes the fact that he never had an enthusiastic base, which means people aren't going to be super defeated by him losing. And he will lose. I'll say that again. But we keep hearing this, and we heard it with Donald Trump too, by the way, back in 2023 and 2024 when the primaries were going on for the presidential election. Donald Trump has too much baggage. We need someone like Ron DeSantis, who doesn't have all that baggage, who won't turn off regular folks. Sure, Trump will win the MAGA base, but the regular folks aren't going to support Donald Trump. We're hearing the same things now against Ken Paxton, being said against Ken Paxton. I don't think it was true for Donald Trump, and I don't think it'll be true for Ken Paxton. And I'll remind you that there's really nothing the left can throw at Ken Paxton that they haven't already thrown at Donald Trump. You'll hear about his affairs. If you don't think Donald Trump has ever had any affairs, I would like to sell you a bridge in Brooklyn. If you don't want the bridge, I've got an oceanfront condo in Tucson, Arizona. Hit me up. I don't think the Republican voters care about that because they elected Donald Trump by 16 points in 2024. So, yeah, sure. Will people sit around a table and say, oh, gosh, it's terrible what he did to his wife? Sure, and it is. And he should be rightly criticized for that. However, is that really that big of a deal in a political election? I don't think so. I don't think so. And again, I submit to you Donald Trump as an example. But they'll say, oh, what about his scandals in terms of financial scandals or whatnot? There's a whole bunch of people out there that are still parroting the same exact stuff that he was impeached for and acquitted several years ago. And to that I say, he was impeached and acquitted for all of that, just like President Trump was. He was quite literally put on trial for all of the supposed financial crimes and payouts and la-di-da-di-da that he supposedly committed. And there was no evidence really for any of it, and he was acquitted. So who cares? Honestly, who cares? And again, the same thing can be said for Donald Trump. So people will tell you that because Ken Paxton is not the cookie cutter candidate that John Cornyn was, he can't win in Texas. It's just ridiculous. There's no evidence for that. In fact, there's evidence to the opposite. Trump was very popular when he ran in Texas every single time, and he has won in Texas every single time, and the last time by 16 points. So to make this case, you essentially have to say, we know that Donald Trump won by 16 points. However, for no reason in particular, all of those people are going to flip on Ken Paxton. Which again, doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. And honestly, I think this is really all just a scare tactic. I think you'll probably stop hearing a lot of this if you're in conservative Republican circles. Over the next several months, you will stop hearing this. I think that narrative was kind of fabricated by the Cornyn campaign in order to make him look more electable and Ken Paxton look less electable. But again, and I cannot stress this enough, it's nonsense. It always has been nonsense. All right, we got a few more races and doodads around the country I want to talk about real quick. We had some primaries in Kentucky last night, so we're going to talk about that coming up in just a second. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. I want to close out with John Cornyn's reaction to effectively losing this Senate race. And I don't want it to be lost on you that is what happened yesterday when President Trump endorsed Ken Paxton, John Cornyn lost. We haven't really had time to see the kind of polls, but the election is on Tuesday. John Cornyn was already down going into the election. Donald Trump does, whether you like it or not, still have massive sway in the state of Texas. So when he loses that endorsement, he loses the election. Now, there are some who do a lot of research into political science that will tell you that really when he got forced into a runoff, that's pretty much when he lost. I think, I want to say it was Ted Cruz who ran against an incumbent for his seat in a primary. And I think when he pushed his incumbent into a runoff, it was something like 2%. He was barely behind by 2%. But just by virtue of pushing that incumbent into the runoff, he essentially guaranteed that he was going to win. The simple fact of the matter is, Cornyn's people have always been less motivated than Ken Paxton's. That's obviously true. Now, we can dig into why that is. I think it's just because Cornyn's not a very interesting guy. He doesn't have a great record. Ken Paxton, at the very least, does have a great record as Attorney General. But, we'll see what happens. We do have some reaction from John Cornyn that I would like to play you. Here he is at an event. This was just a couple of hours after the endorsement from President Trump came out. Take a listen to what he had to say on his loss of the Trump endorsement and effectively the election.
Well, we've always had these family fights within the Republican Party, and then we unify in order to win the election in November. And we'll do that again.
Now, I want you to take note of that because, like I said, all the people on the GOP side that are saying, oh, this is terrible news for the Republicans, James Tallarico is going to win. Even John Cornyn, at least right there, is saying, I don't think this is true.
But I believe that in terms of our success in November, that Ken Paxton would be an albatross around the neck of our candidates and would likely lose to James Tallarico. I think we've come too far and worked too hard to risk that. Well,
again, why? Why do you think he would lose to James Tallarico? What's your reason? What's your reason? Because the Cornyn voters aren't going to show up and vote for Ken Paxton in a November election? I just don't believe that. I just don't believe that. Unless you have some polling that demonstrates that, and if you do, I'd love to see it. If there's polling out there that says, I am a John Cornyn supporter through and through, I love John Cornyn, I'm so disappointed that he lost that I'm going to stay home in November. I have yet to meet that person. And I also have yet to meet someone who says, I'm going to flip and vote for James Tallarico. Now, there is a money issue, and that issue has been raised. Eric Erickson tweeted this out today, or yesterday, actually. The reality here is Ken Paxton can win Texas, but the lift to get him across the finish line will take money away from Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, and other states. It will be a Pyrrhic victory for the GOP. Now, there is a certain element of truth to that, but I think it's not quite the element of truth that they think it is. This primary is going to hurt the national Republicans, but it's not because they're going to have to throw money at Ken Paxton to push him over the edge. It's because they already threw money at John Cornyn in a failed attempt to push him over the edge in the primary. This is from ABC 7. I'm not sure where this local ABC affiliate is out of. I don't know off the top of my head. I think San Antonio. The primary race for Texas United States Senate, held by Republican John Cornyn, has become the most expensive primary race in the nation's history, with roughly $110 million spent in campaign ads. Cornyn's campaign spending accounts for the lion's share of the spending, with a total of $64 million to keep his seat, according to Ad Impact. If you're the incumbent and you have to throw $64 million at your seat, and your seat isn't the presidency, just call it. And it's worth pointing out, a lot of that money did come from the National Republican Senate Committee. It just did. They spent a bunch of money to keep John Cornyn in when they shouldn't have. They should have seen the writing on the wall that I saw months ago, most of Texas saw months ago, and said John Cornyn is going to lose this. That's what they should have done. But they didn't. And so they threw a bunch of money out on John Cornyn. That's what happened. I don't know why they did it. They shouldn't have. Now, the saving grace here is Ken Paxton will be running against James Tallarico, and James Tallarico is an idiot, and he's not going to be popular in this state. Immediately, as of right now moving forward, every ounce of energy that every Republican in this state has should be focused on James Tallarico, just to expose stuff like I'm about to show you right now. This is just a compilation of some of the ridiculous things that James Tallarico has said over the last couple of years. And these are just the highlights. There's way more here.
Did they teach you in Sunday school that Jesus Christ himself was a radical feminist? The American flag is such a complicated symbol for most of us. God is non-binary.
You can't call yourself a Christian and reject the stranger seeking asylum at our southern border.
Our trans community needs abortion care too. Modern science obviously recognizes that there are many more than two biological sexes. In fact, there are 6. Prophetic voices like Jesus have helped me reckon with my own whiteness. Our southern border should be like our front porch. There should be a giant welcome mat out front.
We are trying to fundamentally change the politics in this state and in this country.
Yeah. No need to sit and cry over, your whiteness or your masculinity.
This stuff is just not going to fly in the state of Texas. It's just not. Because the average Texan is not woke. They just aren't woke. Now, real quick, in the last few seconds or minutes of this segment, I want to announce that Thomas Massey's career is effectively over. He has lost his primary yesterday. I know this is a very hotly debated topic in Republican circles, and I would just say to you, unless you know Thomas Massey personally or live in Thomas Massey's district, if you come down really hard one way or the other on whether or not he should have kept his seat, you probably just shouldn't. Now, listen, I like some of the things about Massey, and I dislike some of the things about Massey. I think he's very good on fiscal issues, but I also think he's a kind of one-issue voter, and I don't think that's very productive. He'll vote against anything if it spends money. And listen, I want a balanced federal budget as much as the next guy. I want federal spending to be reined in, but you also have to balance that with a modicum of practicality. And Thomas Massey, in my opinion, didn't do that, and I think that's why Trump campaigned against him so hard, and I think that's why he lost his seat. But also, at the end of the day, I don't care, because I don't live in Kentucky, and I don't live in Thomas Massey's district. So if you're getting all worked up about whether or not Thomas Massey won, why? It doesn't affect you. All right, that is all I have got for you today. Tune in right here, AM 950 KPRC, 7 p.m. on Sunday evening. We'll be back with more. Thank you very much for listening to the Next Gen Report.